Hey everyone, hope you're doing well. If you're using this to fall asleep, get cozy and relax. Don't forget to subscribe, and drop a comment letting me know where you're watching from. Alright, let's get into the story. When I was younger, I like to think I was pretty brave. Maybe it was that sense of invincibility that comes with youth. I'd survived a lot, a stalker who hounded my sister and me for over a year and a half, a sexual assault, 2 house fires, and growing up in a home I'd swear was haunted, not in some whimsical Disney way, but with a creepy torture chamber in the basement and strange things happening all the time. Looking back, maybe those experiences made me feel a bit untouchable, like I'd already faced the worst life could throw at me and nothing else could touch me. Or maybe I just figured I'd gotten all the bad stuff out of the way. Whatever it was, I learned the hard way at 17 that I wasn't as invincible as I thought. I didn't have a driver's license back then. In fact, I was 36 before I got one. I walked most places, sometimes catching rides with friends, and only rarely hitchhiking. The night in question was one of those rare occasions. I'd worked late, was exhausted, and too worn out to walk home. Usually, when I hitched a ride, I had a rule. I wouldn't get in a car with a lone man. Only women, or occasionally men with a wife, girlfriend, or kids in the car. But that night, cars were scarce, it was freezing, and to be honest, when this guy pulled over, I sized him up and figured I could handle him if he tried anything. He was slender, with a strange frailty about him, even though he seemed healthy enough. I got in, and after we agreed on my destination, we exchanged names. I warmed my hands by the heater vent as he spoke softly, asking if I was a local and what I thought of the area. He mentioned he'd only been in town a couple of months, but found it beautiful and hoped to find happiness there. That struck me as an odd thing to say, but I let it go. Snow started falling, and the roads got slick, so he slowed down, keeping his eyes fixed on the windshield and driving in silence. I was fine with that. Small talk was never my thing. About 10 minutes later, I noticed a car near an upcoming intersection sliding a bit, so I said, "Watch out." He slammed on the gas, shooting through the intersection, and shouted, "Don't ever scream at me." I was stunned. I hadn't screamed, but his reaction threw me. I said, "Look, this is close enough. Just pull over here, and I can walk the rest of the way." He didn't seem to hear me. "Richard, did you hear me? You can pull over and let me out." No response. He just stared straight ahead, driving faster now despite the snow. Scared doesn't begin to describe the fear that started clawing at me. I didn't know whether to stay quiet or keep talking, but after his outburst, I sure as hell wasn't going to raise my voice. About a mile later, he started muttering under his breath. I couldn't quite make it out, but I thought he was talking to me, so I said, "Jim, I didn't hear you." He began speaking quietly but rapidly, saying things like, "You're always yelling at me. I've told you time and again I don't like being yelled at. But do you listen?" "No." "Well, I'm done listening to you now. Do you hear that?" I was completely lost. I had no idea how to respond or if I even should. I thought about jumping out of the car but noticed the door lock was missing, just a silver-lined hole where it should have been. I started crying silently, debating whether to grab the wheel and cause an accident, hoping I'd survive. Just as I was weighing my options, he suddenly looked at me for the first time since I'd gotten in. He blinked rapidly, slowed the car, and pulled into a gas station. I waited, hoping he'd unlock the doors, too afraid to say anything that might set him off again. After a minute or two, he said quietly, "I think I'd better let you out here," and hit the button to unlock the doors. I didn't hesitate. I bolted out of the car like it was on fire. I was about to head into the gas station when he called my name. He looked so damn sad that I paused. He apologized, saying he was sorry if he'd scared me, that he'd never have hurt me, and asked if I'd be able to get home okay. I nodded, said I would, and closed the door. As he started pulling out of the lot, he stopped abruptly, his head down. I froze, wondering what he was up to, ready to sprint into the station. But then he opened his window and shouted my name, waving something in his hand, my hat, which I'd left on the seat. I cautiously approached, and he handed it to me, apologizing again. I didn't know what to say, so I just said, "Thanks." I watched him drive off, making sure he was out of sight before moving on, so he wouldn't know which way I was going. I decided to head to a friend's place instead of home. As I walked, I went to put my hat on, and felt something inside. A piece of paper fell out, and folded inside was a $100 bill. The note read, "I'm sorry. Please take a cab. Don't hitchhike anymore tonight." I didn't. In fact, that was the last time I ever hitched a ride alone. It was the mid-90s, and I was 18, having just moved 8 hours away from my parents to attend college in London, Ontario. I put a deposit down on a room on the first floor of an old farmhouse, clearly the oldest house on the street. I loved the room because it had a large bay window that let in tons of natural light. The house had 8 bedrooms, so I had plenty of roommates. On the main floor were Derek, James, John, and me. Upstairs lived Albert and Laura, while Chris rented one of the attic rooms. The other attic room was empty, its door locked by the landlord, who didn't live with us. Though we were all strangers at first, we bonded over the first few weeks of school. We even threw a massive keg party at the end of September and made a bit of cash in the process. One night in early October, around 2 a.m., I was up late playing Chrono Trigger on my Super Nintendo when Laura's boyfriend, Brian, came downstairs with a strange look on his face. Since I was the only one awake, he sat next to me and asked if he could bum a cigarette. It was odd, he and I rarely spoke, and he didn't usually smoke, but I handed him one and passed him my lighter. After lighting it, he said he needed to tell someone what had just happened, but was worried I'd think he was crazy. He looked genuinely shaken, so I assured him I wouldn't judge and urged him to spill. As Brian told it, he and Laura had been asleep in her room. He's a light sleeper, and was woken by a female voice singing Amazing Grace in the bedroom. He tried to wake Laura, but she sleeps like a rock. By the time he got her up, the singing had stopped. I was skeptical, but couldn't ignore the fear in his eyes. I asked if the window was open, but he said it wasn't. For the next few weeks, Brian started hanging out in my room late at night, playing Chrono Trigger until I was too tired to keep going, like he was avoiding Laura's room. A few weeks later, I was spending evenings with Chris and some other roommates watching movies in his attic room. One night, when it was just Chris and me, he mentioned hearing weird things at night. He said he'd hear footsteps going up and down the attic stairs, but when he checked, no one was there. At first, he chalked it up to the creaks of an old house, but what really freaked him out was waking up a few times to the sound of the locked attic door slamming shut. I started wondering if the upstairs tenants were pulling some kind of prank on me, like a running joke. One November night, I just closed my door and was climbing into bed when Chris came barreling down the stairs like a bat out of hell. He made so much noise that everyone in the house gathered around him as he stood outside John's door, across from mine. Out of breath and clearly rattled, he stammered, "I was going to bed." He took a moment to steady his breathing before continuing. "I was going to bed, turned off the lights, and my entire bedroom was covered in tiny glowing things. My bed, my desk, the floor, everything. I picked one up, and they all vanished instantly, except the one in my hand." He held out a small piece of white paper, rectangular, about 1 centimeter wide and 1.5 centimeters long. It wasn't glowing. We all just stared at each other, unsure what to say. We decided to test the paper to see if we could make it glow again, but nothing worked. It was bizarre, and I was starting to think something wasn't right in that house. During the Christmas break that year, everyone went home, leaving the house empty except for Laura, who lived just 15 minutes from her parents and decided to stay. When we returned after New Year's, Laura announced she was moving out in a few days. We asked why she decided so suddenly, and with a terrified look, she explained that while we were gone, doors and cupboards all over the house had been opening and closing on their own. This was Canada in December. No windows were open, and we had no pets. She'd spent most of the break at her parents' place, too scared to stay alone in the farmhouse. Who could blame her? The night Laura left, though, is the one I'll never forget. She'd packed up and moved out by early evening. As an art student, I was working on a painting in my room, an oil painting on a flat piece of wood about 1/2 inch thick, set on a heavy wooden frame nearly 2 inches thick. Once it was done, I placed it on my drawing table to dry. It was around 2:30 a.m. I remember because the X-Men cartoon had just ended and Samurai Pizza Cats was starting on TV. I turned off the TV, climbed into bed, switched off my lamp, and closed my eyes. Minutes later, I heard a sound from the corner of my room, like wood sliding against wood. I thought it might be nothing, but then I heard it again and again. The third time, I sat up and flicked on my lamp. I don't know why, but my eyes went straight to my drawing table. Then, as if drawn by something, I turned my head, following an invisible path across the room to my bedroom door. The moment my gaze landed on the door, I heard a loud slam, like something hitting the wall right where I was looking. I thought I saw something fall from my dresser, which was next to the door, but my door was deadbolt. Nothing could have gotten in. I jumped out of bed and checked the floor by the dresser. Nothing was there. Then I walked to my drawing table, and what I saw sent goosebumps racing up my arms. The heavy wooden painting I'd carefully set to dry was now diagonal on the table, so far off the edge that another half-inch would have sent it crashing to the floor. Completely freaked out, I stepped into the dark hallway, walked to the kitchen and back, confirming no one else was awake. Sleep was out of the question. I grabbed a cigarette, sat on the edge of my bed, and played video games while chain smoking until morning. After that night, not much else happened that stood out. My TV remote went missing for a few weeks, only to turn up in a spot I swore I'd checked multiple times, but that could have been nothing. I was also in the habit of recording my music CDs onto cassette since I still used a Walkman. My portable stereo wasn't fancy, no mic jack, but it worked for recording. I recorded the Counting Crows Live across a wire onto a cassette. When I played it in my Walkman, I heard an inaudible voice over what should have been dead air. The voice persisted even as the opening track, Catapult, started, like it was superimposed. A few seconds in, there was a clicking sound, and then just the music. I still can't make out what the voice said, but I've kept that cassette tucked away in storage somewhere. Aside from these minor incidents, which I kept to myself, nothing major happened in my second or third year there. By the third year, all my roommates had changed, and those earlier events were fading into memory. This sounds crazy, I know, but it all happened when I was about 7 years old. I'm 23 now, and it still gives me chills. I'm also curious if anyone can help me figure out what it might have been. Back when I was 7, I slept on a waterbed. The head of the bed was against the wall next to my door frame. My door opened inward, so when it was open, I could see it clearly. As soon as you stepped out of my room, my parents' room was to the right, and farther down the hall to the left were the bathroom and my brother's room. We kept the bathroom light on at night because we had an all-black cat who loved sleeping in the hallway, and we didn't want to trip over her or step on her in the dark on the way to the bathroom. I'll say this with certainty. When these incidents happened, my brother wasn't home, and both my parents were asleep with their door closed. My brother was 14 at the time, which always reassured me that, even though he was in dash, he wasn't home. It couldn't have been him. Most nights, I slept like a rock. Nothing could wake me. But around 2 or 3 a.m., I'd suddenly jolt awake, my face toward my open door, and I wouldn't fall back asleep easily. I'd lie there staring at the reflection of the bathroom light on my door, thinking about the next day at school, what we'd have for breakfast, just typical kid stuff. Then, without any sound, I'd watch the bathroom light slowly fade, so gradually, until it turned off completely. I'd hear the distinct pop of the switch flipping off. Our bathroom had one of those rotary dimmer switches that could make the light brighter or dimmer. I was confused, but figured maybe the switch was loose or something. So I'd get out of bed, walk down the hall, sometimes accidentally nudging the cat, turn the light back on, and head back to bed. For some reason, once I turned the light back on, I could fall asleep again. It was weird. This started happening every other night for about a week. I'd wake up in the middle of the night, watch the light slowly fade to black after staring at it for 5 minutes or so, get up, kick the cat, turn the light back on, and go back to sleep. Then, for about a week, it stopped. I slept through the night, woke up fine, went to school, came home, played with my Legos and Lincoln Logs, ate dinner, stayed up late with my neighbor, and went to bed. One night, I was in the middle of a dream. I still remember it vividly. I was running down the street in broad daylight, chasing my friends to play football, when I was suddenly jolted awake. I fixed my eyes on the bathroom light and watched it fade slowly to black, just like before. I got up, started walking down the hall, but the cat wasn't there. That happens sometimes. Maybe she was in my parents' room. I reached the bathroom, turned the light back on full blast, and started walking back to my room. I got about 4 steps away when I saw the reflection dim rapidly to black, followed by a loud pop as the switch shut off completely. I was standing in the middle of the hallway, swallowed by total darkness. I turned around, walked back to the bathroom, and turned the light back on. I started walking again, made it all the way to my bedroom doorway, and then the light went black, no fade, no pop from the switch, just instant darkness. At that point, I'd had enough. I climbed into bed, lay down, and tried to sleep. It took me about 2 hours, but I eventually drifted off. The next night, I was dozing off around 11 or midnight, slowly fading. I was facing my door, but my still eyes closed. I wasn't even thinking about the light. I fell asleep. Since I had a waterbed, the frame was low to the ground, and I slept right on the edge, pressed against the side barrier. I woke up to find my pillow hanging halfway off the bed. Annoyed at being woken up because of it, I grabbed the pillow, tossed it back under my head, and went back to sleep. About an hour later, I woke up again, feeling my head slowly sliding off the bed with the pillow. I bolted upright, and the pillow fell to the floor. I got mad and yelled for my brother to stop messing with me, even though he wasn't home. I grabbed the pillow, slammed it back onto the waterbed, shut my eyes, and lay there. I didn't move or open my eyes for what felt like forever. I have no idea how long it actually was. I was pretending to be asleep when I felt a tug on my pillow, and it started sliding off the bed again. I snapped my eyes open and whipped my head to the left, toward my doorway. What I saw still haunts me to this day. It looked like a small child, maybe 5 years old, lying on the floor with its arms stretched out, its hand gripping the corner of my pillow. But it had no face. It was just the outline of a head and body darker than dark, like a shadow, but blacker than the blackness of my room and hallway, which seemed gray in comparison. I stared straight into where its face should have been for a good 3 seconds. No eyes, no lips, no mouth. It didn't make a sound. I knew I was looking at its face because when I saw it, it looked up at me. I opened my mouth to scream for my mom, and it let go, sliding backward while still lying flat out of my doorway. I heard heavy footsteps pounding down the hallway, followed by a door slamming loudly. I screamed for my mom, and she came running out of her room, scooping me up and asking what was wrong. She took me to her bedroom. Her door opened so I could see the hallway. My brother's door and the bathroom door were both wide open. There was no way they'd been slammed shut. It wasn't possible. I've never seen anything like that again, not that vividly. It horrified me, and the fact that I can recall it 16 years later like it happened yesterday is what creeps me out the most. It stuck with me. Does anyone have any idea what this could have been? This scary encounter happened tonight, and I still don't know why it happened. All I can say is that it did, and it terrifies me every time I think about it. I'm sitting in my room with all the lights on as I write this, and I might just sleep with them on tonight. Earlier, my younger brother Moose and I were home alone for a bit while my mom went to visit a friend. It's no big deal. We usually just watch TV and hang out until she gets back. But tonight we got bored and decided to go for a run. Moose is starting school on Tuesday and plans to play sports, so he's been working on his endurance. Since I'm usually home in the evenings, I've been joining him on his runs to spend some time together. We typically go late in the evening when it's cooler, and most dog walkers and older folks are indoors. Our neighborhood has always felt safe, but tonight that changed. We set off around 8 p.m. It was starting to get dark. Moose usually runs ahead and takes a different street while I stick to the main one. The two streets climb a big hill and eventually meet to form a large circle. We always meet at the top and then head back down to the bottom to talk, maybe tease each other with something like, "You tired yet?" Sometimes we pass each other, and he goes the way I came, and I take his route, knowing we'll meet up at the top again. This has been our routine for the past few weeks, and I've enjoyed our walks home afterward, joking and catching up. But tonight something happened. Moose took off like usual, and I popped in my earbuds, playing music as I started walking down the street that leads to the circle where we run. I was moving slowly, savoring the music and the cool night air, when I passed a side street running perpendicular to my road. It was pretty dark by then, but I could make out two people walking toward me with what looked like a dog. I didn't pay them much attention. I didn't want them to think I was staring, so I turned my music up louder and picked up my pace a bit. They did too. They turned onto my road and started walking parallel to me on the opposite side. By now, I could see them a little better. One guy was wearing a white shirt. I caught it out of the corner of my eye, but I kept walking because I was passing a patch of woods, and the fact that they were matching my faster pace was starting to creep me out. I've never felt anxious walking alone in our neighborhood at night, but something about this felt off. I could vaguely hear them talking, but I couldn't make out what they were saying. It sounded like garbled nonsense. I walked faster, then faster still, because now I had woods on both sides of me, and that really unnerved me. The idea of being dragged into a dense forest by kidnappers or white shirt-wearing, gibberish-speaking weirdos was not something I wanted to experience. I'm 5 feet tall and about 100 pounds. There's no way I could fight off two guys. I was genuinely scared. Then the guy in the white shirt started walking toward me fast. It was happening. My mind was racing, my legs felt like jelly, and I could barely think. I was about to run when I saw a light ahead. Moose was walking toward me, shining his phone's flashlight in my face. I've never been so relieved to see my little brother. He may be younger, but he's about 7 inches taller than me and looks mature for his age. I was so glad he'd stopped to wait instead of running up the hill like usual. But then it hit me. Why hadn't he gone up the hill? Did you see them? Where'd they go? His voice wasn't calm like it usually is. I immediately looked back. We were standing across from a house with a porch light, and I could clearly see the empty street behind me. You saw them too. Who were they? There were 2 of them. My voice was shaky as I kept glancing back. Yeah, they were right there on the street behind you, and now they've just vanished. He looked worried, and I started replaying what had just happened. Maybe they went into the woods, I said, grasping for a logical explanation. But if they'd run into the woods, we would have heard twigs snapping or leaves crunching. Maybe even cursing, since there are huge thorn patches at the edge of the woods along that street. There's no way they could have silently disappeared into a thorny, twig-filled forest, but the street was empty, and there we were, staring at it. It felt so wrong. They probably just ran back, I said, trying to convince myself my mind was playing tricks. I didn't want to scare Moose or feed into my own fear. Let's just run. We're probably making something out of nothing. It was all I could think to say. Okay. Yeah, I don't know, Moose said hesitantly, shrugging before slowly jogging up the hill on the left while I took the right. I cranked my music louder, trying to drown out the whole ordeal, but I couldn't shake this awful feeling. As I ran, it grew stronger, like someone or something was watching me. I glanced back. Nothing but an empty street. I started feeling faint. When I'm scared, I either freeze or pass out, and right now, I felt like I might collapse. I slowed to a walk but kept moving, knowing I'd meet Moose at the top. Then I thought about him. What if whatever was following me was after him too? There were 2 guys. What if one was coming for me and the other for him? Maybe it sounds paranoid, but I picked up my pace, running like the devil was behind me. I had to slow down almost immediately because my heart condition kicked in, and it felt like my heart was about to burst out of my chest. The feeling of being watched didn't fade completely, but it wasn't as intense anymore. In fact, it seemed to be lessening. I looked back, still nothing but an empty street. Eventually, I saw Moose walking toward me, and he looked spooked. Let's go home, I said, and he nodded eagerly. The overwhelming feeling was gone now, so I decided not to mention it to Moose. It wouldn't help anything. We had to pass those woods again on our way back, and I didn't want him to be needlessly scared. By then, I was almost convinced the feeling of being watched was just paranoia. We started walking home, and everything seemed fine until we neared the woods and the street where it all went down. There were 2 guys, right? You saw them. I didn't imagine them, I said. No, there were 3 guys following you. I saw a third one step out from behind and start walking, he said slowly. I saw them. They were speaking some kind of weird language or something, but I don't know what they were saying or if they were even human. They were right there, walking with you, and then I shined a light, and they were gone. I didn't hear them run off, and I didn't see them turn around. They just vanished. My stomach dropped. I usually laugh off stuff like this, but he looked genuinely scared, and Moose doesn't want to get spooked or believe in things like aliens or humanoids or whatever those were. I started feeling sick because I remember that feeling of being watched, and now I couldn't just write it off as paranoia. Moose had seen them too, and he'd seen one more than I had. It didn't make sense, but it had clearly happened, and we still had to pass those woods. Before we started walking again, we both pulled out our phones and turned on the flashlights. Moose held both in front of us, scanning the woods to see if he could spot anything. Just as we were about to leave the woods behind and reach a more open part of the street with houses, I heard something to my right, a hoarse, loud whisper from behind the tree closest to me. It wasn't just a simple hey. The H was hissed or wheezed, and the I was drawn out, taunting. That's the best way I can describe it. I half expected demonic cackling or a face to pop out from behind the tree, but nothing followed. The whisper alone was enough to send me sprinting up the street, with Moose running beside me, then passing me, leaving his poor hobbit-sized sister alone in the dark to be eaten by white-shirt-wearing, wheezing, whispering demon people who hide behind trees at night to scare paranoid women like me. Eventually, he slowed down as I gasped my way to him, catching my breath. I was about to ask if he'd heard it when he said something that nearly made me lose it. Just before he started running, he'd scanned the tree line one last time with his flashlight and saw several pairs of eyes glowing among the trees. About a week before my 10th birthday, I walked to the corner store with a $5 bill to pick up a jar of ragu for my mom. On my way home, a man I'd never seen before fell into step beside me and started talking. "Hi," he said cheerfully. "My name's Dr. Ramsey. I'm a pediatrician." Do you know what a pediatrician is? I kept walking silently, not responding, hoping he'd take the hint and leave me alone. Subtlety wasn't his strength, though, because he kept chattering. "Are your parents looking for a pediatrician for you? Of course, you're almost a big girl now. You'll need a different kind of doctor soon, won't you? That's okay, though they can still bring you to me until then. What's your name? You have beautiful hair. I was just on my way to get some suckers for the candy jar in my office." "Do you like suckers?" Thankfully, we were nearing my house, so I bolted up the back steps and through the kitchen door. I didn't know it then, but that was the start of a long, terrifying ordeal. It didn't take long for Dr. Ramsey to become a regular presence. At first, it seemed harmless enough, at least to a kid. He'd drive by almost every day, smiling and waving. I told my mom, who suggested maybe it was just on his way home from work. But then the phone call started. My dad called me into the living room one day and sat me down. He asked about the day Dr. Ramsey followed me home and whether I'd talked to him. He assured me I wasn't in trouble, but needed to tell the truth. I said no, and he asked if I was sure, if I might be forgetting something. I said no again, and he frowned. "Then how does he know your name?" I had no answer. It turned out that wasn't all he knew. He knew my sister's name, too. Soon, neither my sister nor I were allowed to answer the phone. He called several times a day. At first, we didn't know what he was saying, but one night, one of my brothers told us he was threatening to hurt me, and later my sister. Things got complicated after that. My dad called the police, but this was before stalking laws existed, so there wasn't much they could do. They told my parents to call back if he tried anything. My dad then reached out to a friend of his, a cop from back in the day. For the next month, Dad's friend escorted me to and from school. Suddenly, my life screeched to a halt. I couldn't walk to school alone, play outside, or go to Super America, kind of like a 7-Eleven for those who don't know. When access to me was completely cut off, things escalated. He started threatening my sister, too. One afternoon, my sister, two of my brothers, my mom, and I were in the kitchen when one of my brothers caught a glimpse of someone in the garage. It was him. Dr. Ramsey bolted out, my brothers chasing after him. They ran all the way to Cherokee Park, where he lost them in the trees. My parents called the police again, but nothing came of it. All they had was a description and a name that was almost certainly fake. A couple of weeks later, we woke up to find our dog hanging from the side porch. She was a beautiful saddleback German Shepherd, born the same day as me. We were all devastated. The cops said there was no evidence it was him and ruled it an accident, but none of us believed that. Meanwhile, his phone calls grew more detailed. He'd talk about who was home and who wasn't. If my brother said my dad was there, he'd correct him, naming exactly who was in the house. He also described the house itself, how the kitchen window could be opened with a knife from the outside, even when locked, and how the French doors connecting the living room to the side porch had a lock that could be jimmied if you wiggled it just right. That night, my dad drove carpenter nails into the bottom of the French doors until he could order a new lock. One evening, my parents had to attend a company event for my dad's work. My older brothers were at Saints West roller skating rink. My sister was on the phone with her best friend. My little brother was asleep on the living room floor, and I was watching Donnie and Marie on the midnight special with Wolfman Jack. It was late. Suddenly, the top of the French doors swung inward. In the split second before the nails at the bottom snapped them back, I saw his silhouette. My sister hurled the phone at the TV, and we ran upstairs. Halfway up, we realized our little brother was still asleep on the floor. We crept back down, grabbed him, and bolted to our bedroom. We didn't turn on the light so we could see outside. We watched through the window for a while, and when we didn't spot him, we sneaked down the hall to our brother's room to look out their window. There he was, standing at the back door. He knocked loudly. "What do you want?" My sister called out through the window. He stepped back and said, "Is this the Mercy residence? I have a pizza for delivery. Can you come to the door?" She scoffed, yelling that she wasn't stupid. She could see he didn't have a pizza, and she was calling the cops. He left soon after. My brothers came home later, and we told them what happened. They searched the yard but didn't find him. We'd pretty much given up on calling the police since it never helped, so we went back inside, each of us, except my youngest brother, still asleep, clutching a kitchen knife just in case. Later, one of my brothers went to the kitchen for a bowl of cereal. You know that feeling when you can sense someone watching you? He had it in spades. He kept glancing around the kitchen, through the doorway to the dining room, at the windows. He didn't see anything, but the feeling persisted. He moved closer to the back door to get a better look. The kitchen lights reflected on the door's 3 rows of 3 windows, so he still couldn't see clearly. He stepped closer, then closer again, until he was right up against it. He cupped his hands around his face to block the reflection, and there, on the other side of the glass, was Dr. Ramsey, smiling back at him. He turned to yell for our older brothers, but when he looked back, Ramsey was gone. They went out to search again, but found nothing. The next night, we were playing Crazy Eights at the table, and one of my brothers was restless. My sister asked what was wrong, and he said he kept feeling like any second there'd be a loud bang on a door or window. Almost immediately after he said it, there was a sharp bang on the window right behind him. In the chaos, my 2 older brothers ran outside, but he was already gone. A couple of weeks later, I was at school, swinging upside down on the playground during recess, when I saw that familiar blue Ford Galaxy cruising by slowly. There he was, smiling and waving, calling my name. I ran to the teacher and told her. The school knew all about him, so she took me inside and called my mom. That same day, the school office had gotten a call asking my mom to confirm that my dad was picking me up because he'd supposedly called to say he was on his way. He wasn't. Not long after, I woke up one night thirsty and went to the kitchen for a drink. There was my dad, sitting alone in the dark, a gun on the table. He was done waiting for the police to act only after Ramsey tried something. He was tired of his kids being terrorized, of living in fear every time he left for work that something would happen to us while he was gone. I sat with him for a while, watching before he sent me back to bed. These events, and many more, stretched over about 18 months. Then, as suddenly as it began, it stopped. He vanished from our lives. No more phone calls, no more drive-bys with creepy waves, nothing. For a long time, during and after the Dr. Ramsey days, I had recurring nightmares where I'd wake up to find him standing over me as I slept. It took years to feel like a kid again. I learned later that in those calls, he told my parents he was going to rape and kill me, and later my sister, and that there was nothing they could do about it. I don't know what happened to him when he disappeared, whether he was in a car wreck, locked up, or in a coma. Sometimes I wonder if the nightmare ended because of that night my dad sat in the darkened kitchen. I don't know, and I'm not sure I want to. If you've been following my posts over the last few weeks, I've been selling my belongings through garage sales and Craigslist listings to fund my dream of traveling the world. We've all heard horror stories about the Craigslist killer and other creeps, but I always felt like that kind of thing couldn't happen to me. Who does that actually happen to, right? My experiences selling on Craigslist have been great so far. Most people were kind and excited about my travel plans. I didn't think anything could go wrong. I took precautions like meeting buyers at nearby gas stations for smaller items, but some things like my skateboard mini ramp and massage table were too big to haul there, so I had to sell them from my house. This brings me to the story of the Craigslist psycho. I'd had 2 massage tables listed on Craigslist for a few weeks. I'm not a masseuse and I've never used them. I'm not even sure how I ended up with them, but somehow they were mine. Despite a lot of interest, I hadn't sold either one yet. Then Paul called me on Monday night asking about the portable massage table. He seemed friendly enough. After I gave him the details, he said he'd come by around 6 p.m. on Tuesday to check it out and would call at 5:30 for directions. Sounded good to me. Tuesday rolled around and Paul called at 5:30 as promised. I gave him directions and he showed up at my place. I pulled the massage table out of the garage and unfolded it for him to inspect. He asked a few questions while looking it over. I offered to bring it into the driveway for better light or fully set it up, but he said no to both. Then he offered $100, half my asking price. I countered with $125, and he agreed. I was fine with the lower price since the table was missing its headpiece and leg extensions, which I'd mentioned he could buy online. We discussed this while he inspected it, and it was clear from the ad photos and his quick look that those parts weren't included. He paid me, folded up the table, and left. I went back inside, took the Craigslist ad down, and tweeted, "Just sold my massage table for $125. About an hour later, my phone rang. It was Paul, and he was furious. Instead of being calm, he immediately started yelling, accusing me of being unethical and deceiving him into buying a table with sawed-off legs. I was stunned by his aggressive tone and took a moment to respond. I calmly explained that the legs weren't sawed off and that I hadn't deceived him. He'd inspected the table himself before buying. I also reminded him that the missing parts were available online or through the manufacturer. But Paul wasn't having it. He kept shouting, calling me every name in the book and tearing into my character. I asked what he wanted me to do. He demanded to return the table and get a refund. I told him I couldn't deal with it right then because I was about to leave and asked him to call me the next day before 7 p.m. After hanging up, I posted on Twitter and Facebook asking for advice on whether I should refund him. Almost everyone said no, which matched how I felt, but I also didn't want to make some random guy furious. I talked it over with a friend, and we came up with a plan. I'd tell Paul the first one give a refund and see how he reacted. If he freaked out, I'd offer $20 as a compromise. If that didn't work, I'd consider a full refund to keep the peace. The next day, I was on a Skype call with another friend when Paul called again. I ignored it, telling my friend I'd deal with him later, and asked for more advice on handling the situation. While we were talking, I heard someone in my driveway. My front door was wide open, so I jumped up to close and lock it, shutting the blinds so no one could see inside. For context, I live in a garage apartment, a separate building above a 4-car garage with neighbors in the main house out front. Then, without warning, Paul started banging on my door with such force I thought he'd break it down. This wasn't a polite knock to talk things out, he was pounding like a maniac. My whole apartment was shaking. I sat there in silence on the Skype call, whispering to my friend, "What do I do? Seriously, what the hell do I do?" She told me to ignore it and hope he'd leave. But then he started circling my apartment, banging on the garage doors and even my neighbor's house. I was in shock, muttering, "What kind of person does this?" He kept calling my phone, but I didn't answer. I was terrified, hoping he'd just go away. My mind was racing. I felt like an idiot for having this transaction at my house. My friend suggested threatening to call the cops if he didn't leave. He was still circling, pounding on everything. I opened the blinds just enough to crack the window from my second-floor apartment and started to ask what the hell he was doing. Before I could say anything, he screamed, "Come out here right now and give me my money back. You deceived me. What kind of person are you?" I shouted back, "Paul, what are you doing at my house? You can't just show up uninvited and start beating down doors. I don't even know you." He claimed we'd agreed to meet at 6 p.m. and that I'd promised a refund, which was a lie. I told him I never said we were meeting or that I'd refund him. I also mentioned I'd called the manufacturer, who confirmed the missing parts cost $10. That set him off even more. He yelled, "I'm going to sue you." I recorded all our calls, so I have evidence. I told him to listen to the calls then, because they'd prove I never promised a refund or a meeting. He kept ranting, saying, "I want to get my money back one way or another. I'll sue you. I'll sit on your doorstep until you come out. I know you're leaving at 7 p.m., so I'll wait all night." I was shaking, saying, "Paul, please leave. You're scaring me. I feel threatened, and if you don't go, I'm calling the police." He dared me to call them, claiming they just make me refund him. I grabbed my phone and dialed 911. "Hello, I have an intruder trapping me inside my house," I told the operator. Paul was still pacing outside, banging on the garage doors and my neighbor's door. I gave the operator a quick rundown. I sold him a Craigslist item, and now he was back uninvited, trying to break down my door, circling my building and threatening me. They asked for details like my address and his description, then said an officer was on the way. The call disconnected, so I shut the window and blinds and went back to my bedroom, where my friend was still on Skype. I told her, "I called the cops. They're coming. Can you hear him banging? It's so loud. He's going to break in. I'm actually scared now." She tried to calm me, saying, "The cops are on their way. Just stay calm." I was freaking out, repeating, "What the hell is he doing? Who does this?" I called 911 again to confirm an officer was coming. They said one was en route and would arrive within 20 minutes, but it felt like forever. I called my ex, Curtis, but he was too far to help. I started tweeting about the situation to vent, tears streaming down my face. I'm a tough person. I don't call 911 lightly, but I genuinely felt my life was in danger. The banging was so intense it echoed through my apartment, like he was about to break in and hurt me. I texted my neighbors not to go outside and that the cops were coming. Later, my neighbor said he didn't intervene because he thought it was a personal dispute, not a random psycho. I kept peeking out the window, and Paul saw me sometimes. He called my phone repeatedly. Finally, I answered, fed up, and said, "Do you have any intention of giving me my money back?" He replied, "Not anymore. I didn't till you showed up uninvited and started threatening me. Then I heard the best sound ever, the police arriving." I hung up and looked out the window. Paul was still pacing, talking on the phone to no one, which made me laugh through my tears. He ran to the cop, walking with him up the driveway to tell his side. When the cop was near my door, I opened the window, and he asked me to come down and talk. I asked if it was safe, and he said yes. I met him in my stairwell, where he spoke to me privately. I explained everything. I sold Paul the table, he inspected it, knew it was missing parts, and bought it as is. He came back uninvited, banging on my doors, circling my apartment, and threatening me. The cop said it was a civil matter, and that Paul would need to take me to small claims court if he wanted to press charges. Still crying, I said I didn't care, he wouldn't win anyway, and I'd been willing to refund him until he went psycho. The cop agreed that Paul bought it as is and asked if I wanted him off my property. I said yes, explaining I was scared he'd come back since he knew where I lived. The cop promised to warn Paul that returning would result in a criminal charge. He told me to go back inside and assured me he'd handle it. Within 5 minutes, I heard Paul's car leave. I grabbed my skateboard, jumped in my truck, and got out of there, blocking my car so he couldn't follow. Curtis called and offered to meet me at my place later to grab my things so I wouldn't have to sleep there. I agreed, relieved. The next day, I noticed the garage door looked slightly tampered with, but everything seemed fine. Around 5 p.m., I got a call from someone asking about the portable massage table, the ad I'd already removed. The guy said, "I'm calling about the portable massage table. I told him I'd sold it but had a regular one for sale. He asked, "Did you get $150 for it?" "That's what I'd pay." I replied, "Yep, got $150. It sold." He hung up. "Nice try, Paul." I'm a computer technician by trade, working for a company that contracts with local businesses and private clients to set up internet connections, install software, and fix whatever computer issues pop up. You wouldn't believe the wild stories and problems people come up with. Some folks, even now, barely know how to turn on a computer. One day, I got a call from a local business complaining about their internet acting up, insisting they must have a virus. I sighed, figuring someone probably unplugged a network cable or accidentally downloaded a Trojan horse. When I arrived, the guy who called me spotted me right away and launched into a rant about hackers, how much he hated Microsoft Windows, and how it was riddled with viruses, typical nonsense I hear on these jobs. He led me to his computer, and I set up my laptop in front of it to get to work. He wished me luck and wandered off to do whatever he does when he's not panicking about his tech. I opened his browser, and no surprise, it loaded a blank page. The guy didn't even have a homepage set. So I tried connecting to Google.com, but got a 404 error. I knew Google wasn't down, so clearly there was an issue with his internet connection. I opened the Network and Sharing Center to run the built-in troubleshooter, but I nearly face-bombed when I saw he wasn't connected to any network at all. I searched for available networks and found a few wireless ones, all WPA encrypted, and I was pretty sure this guy wouldn't know the keys. So I pulled out my laptop and ran a WEP cracking tool to get his computer back online. While waiting for the tool to do its thing, another network popped up on my screen, an unprotected one with an SSID made up of a random hexadecimal string. I was bored, waiting for the client to come back, so I decided to connect to it and poke around to see what it was about. I connected without any issues and started digging into my toolkit of hacking tools to trace the source of this mysterious network. As I was messing around, my computer froze for a second or two. It's rare for my machine to do that, so it caught me off guard, but I brushed it off as a slow connection and kept going. A couple of minutes later, it froze again, and then again a few minutes after that, each time lasting a bit longer. I started to get uneasy. What was up with this network? Things took a turn for the weird. After a few more pauses, my screen flickered, and out of nowhere, my browser opened by itself. Now I was worried I'd somehow picked up malware from the sketchy network. I tried to close the browser and disconnect, but no matter how many times I clicked the disconnect button, my computer wouldn't respond. Everything else on my screen seemed to work fine, but I was stuck on this network. I muttered to myself, "This is going to be a long day," and was about to hit the power button for a hard reset when my browser opened again, this time with small chat box. "Hello," it said. I stared at the screen, confused, trying to figure out what was happening. Then another message appeared. "I want to talk to you now." I'd heard about AI programs designed to simulate conversations with canned responses, but this didn't feel right. This was some nasty virus. Another message popped up. "You need to leave this network now. This is your last warning." I figured it might be an automated security program to keep hackers out. I had to admit, it was impressive. I'd never seen anything like it before. Then it said, "I'm telling you one last time, leave now." I don't know why, but I typed a response back to whatever this thing was. What came next chilled me to the bone. The program, or whatever it was, started listing personal information about me. My name, address, phone number, credit card details, my parents' names, their addresses. My heart sank, and all the color drained from my face. I couldn't move, paralyzed with fear, just staring at the screen. But it got worse. The next message read, "Don't look at me like that." My webcam light was on. "You really shouldn't stare, H3 man 4694. You might see something you regret." Suddenly, my screen was flooded with the most horrific images imaginable. Disembowelments, people eating each other, video clips of mass suicides and firing squads. My heart was pounding, my body trembling as these images seared into my mind. These were things no one should ever see. With every ounce of strength I had left, I slammed my finger on a power button and shut my laptop. I bolted to the bathroom, threw up a couple of times, and stood there drenched in sweat. barely able to pull myself together. It took me about 20 minutes to even think about going back to my computer, and even then, I could hardly bring myself to get near it. I glanced at my client's computer. It was now connected to the wireless network I'd been cracking earlier, working perfectly fine. Just then, the client came back and thanked me for fixing his internet. I didn't say a word. I grabbed my laptop and got out of there as fast as I could. Back when I was a freshman in high school, I had a MySpace page like everyone else. One evening, I got a friend request from some attractive girl. She messaged me, and after a bit of chatting, she suggested we trade nudes. Being a dumb 14-year-old, I thought, oh yeah, this is going to be awesome. So I snapped a few pictures of myself, and she sent me some of her own. Everything seemed great until it wasn't. Out of nowhere, I got a message on AIM from someone I didn't know. It basically said, hey, I have those naked pictures of you. If you don't talk to me, I'm going to send them to everyone on your friends list. I freaked out. I had no clue what to do, so I just started talking to him. At first, he claimed he was a senior at my high school. He demanded I get on my computer every night at 9 p.m. to chat with him, or he'd leak the photos. This went on for weeks, and things kept getting worse. By then, I knew he wasn't from my school. He was an adult and a total psycho. One night, I was at a friend's house, and the only person home was my sister. She called me, saying some guy had phoned a house, insisting on talking to me, and got furious when she told him I wasn't there. A few nights later, I couldn't get on AIM until midnight. The second I logged in, his first message was, I've been sitting in front of your house, admiring your Winnie the Pooh flag and trying to look into your bedroom window. I lost it. My mom always put up seasonal flags, and we had this cheesy Winnie the Pooh Valentine's Day one on the front door. Up until that point, I hadn't told anyone about this creep, hoping he'd just disappear. But this was too much. I woke up my brother and spilled everything. He insisted we call the police, but I was convinced I could handle it myself and didn't want them involved. He wasn't having it, so he woke up my parents, and I told them the whole story. My mom, understandably, flipped out and called the cops right away. The police came, and I showed them some of the messages this guy had sent. They took a report, and from that night on, I ignored him completely, bracing myself for the worst, accepting that the world might see those pictures. Over the next few months, I got messages from random girls who'd received my photos. I was mortified and dreaded going to school. The guy spread lies, saying I'd sent him the pictures and that I was gay, which, at that age, messed with my head big time. Fast forward to my senior year, and I'd mostly moved on. The whole ordeal had faded, and life was going well, until one night at a football game. I was heading to the concession stand with some friends when a random man approached me and said, somebody wants to talk to you under the bleachers. My heart dropped. It had been almost 4 years, but I knew it was him. I could feel it in the way he spoke. I told the guy I wasn't interested and kept walking. My friends asked what was up, and I gave them a quick rundown of who I thought it was. We went back to the stands, but then another friend ran up and said, hey, some weird guy's in the bathroom showing people naked pictures of you. A teacher sitting nearby overheard and immediately called the police, then bolted to the bathroom to catch the guy. He was already gone, but I gave the cops a description of the man, and some concerned parents had seen what he was driving when he left. I didn't sleep for days after that. I was terrified this creep would show up at my house. I couldn't believe he was still after me. But after a few months, nothing else happened, and I started to let it go. Then, one afternoon in the spring of my senior year, I got called into the dean's office. There were several police officers and a detective waiting. They told me they'd caught the guy who'd been harassing me. Turns out he'd been targeting other kids at my school for years. He had a rap sheet, jail time for sexual assault against a minor, and a slew of other crimes. The cops found gigabytes of child pornography on his computer, along with tons of evidence of his obsession with me. After a long trial, he's locked up until 2037. Hopefully, he's out of my life for good.